Okay, thank you, Dipro, and good evening to you all. This would be the second lecture of the series "What is Marxism?" Introductory lectures, and this lecture was initiated on 11th of November. That is just 7 days back, and today we'll be having the second lecture. And since I have just to remind you to kindly put off your audios and videos during the lecture, and secondly, in case if you have any question, please put it in the chat box, and after the lectures end, the speaker will try to address the questions as far as possible. Okay, over to Pranab.
Thank you, everybody, all those who are attending. Uh, we seem to be getting sparser and sparser. And we were really overjoyed when the registration touched the 500 mark. But then the attendance was itself poor in the last lecture. But anyway, let us go on. Now, through this lecture and the next, I intend to discuss what is my take on Marx's philosophy. That is important for both understanding Marxian political economy as well as for understanding his politics. I will be discussing Marx's critique of Hegel, Dialectical Materialism, which is the more orthodox or more widely, at least by the parties, accepted as the philosophy of Marx. We will be critiquing it and through our reading of the thesis on Feuerbach, and we will go on to explain why we think that the concept of overdetermination, which was, of course, inaugurated by Mao Zedong, but popularized by Althusser, why it captures Marxist philosophy better. But before I go into the lecture proper, perhaps it would be worthwhile just recapitulating briefly what we discussed in our previous lecture. In the previous lecture, we discussed roughly the background in which Marx was writing, both his personal background as well as the socio-economic background. He was writing from 1843 to 1883. During this period, preceding this period, there was the agrarian revolution, then there was the industrial revolution. What was the impact on this? Basically, there was a flowering of individualism, there was freedom from the feudal bondages, and there was liberalism, atomism, and rationalism. This pervaded not only political economy, culture, but also even religion. Now, through this period, there was overriding optimism among the middle classes and, of course, among the bourgeoisie, who prospered greatly through the middle of the 18th century to roughly the end of the 19th century. Now, liberalism, together with this optimism, gave birth to what we now know as classical political economy, which is epitomized in Smith, particularly in his Wealth of Nations. Now, while a few prospered, most really had a miserable time, both socially and economically, as we discussed in our previous lecture. As a result of this, there was discontent, there was sporadic violence, and also there was the germination of socialist ideas of various kinds. Now, Marx's ideas were descended from classical political economy as well as from the socialist thought that we are talking about, and also his experiences with the workers' movements with which he was very closely associated and led these movements. But apart from these sources, there was also a very important source, his critique of German philosophy, particularly of Hegel. Now, the depth of this critique, in our view, in my view, is not really appreciated by what is the known as the standard interpretation of Marxist philosophy, what we call dialectical materialism. Now, why are we concerned with Marxist philosophy? You see, Marxist philosophy is central to understanding not only Marxian political economy, but also his politics. Now, Marxist philosophy, we can differentiate it from the way in which Smith was thinking, which was basically Hegelian. Smith was, that is the standard textbook presentation of Smith, which calls him, which shows him up as an essentialist person with an entry point of self-seeking individuals who, if left to themselves, that is, if the markets were free, they would be the most good for most of the people. We know, of course, that this is not the proper representation of Smith. Now we know that because neither was his entry point totally self-centered individuals, nor did he really overcome the problem of conflict even in a free market. There was a conflict between public goods and private goods. For example, what we now have, that privatization of education, whether that is desirable, the conflicts like these. Now, because those of us who know a bit of economics, we call it the problem of externality. That is, if a person gets educated, not only does that person benefit, but also society at large benefits from this, and this has been discussed in great detail by Amartya Sen. And therefore, it is necessary that the public should fund it, because it is not, I'm not gaining the entire fruits of my education. So it is, if I am left to fund my own education, what will happen is that education will be underfunded. So this was an area of conflict which is still there if you let the market work. And also there was a question of what is public space and what is private space, whether knowledge should be public or private. This we discussed in our previous class. Now, but the mainstream presentation of classical political economy is that Smith was an essentialist, and his essential entry point, which explains the entire fabric of classical political economy, is self-seeking individuals. Now, as different from this, Marx's entry point into his political economy was what we call an overdetermined, that is, causes, effects and causes, they determine each other mutually. We will discuss this in greater detail as we go along. So this was a point of difference in how we gather knowledge. This was a point of difference how we analyze. Now, before we move on to discuss this overdetermined concept of Marxist philosophy through a reading of his thesis on Feuerbach, we will have to confront what is the standard interpretation of Marxist philosophy, which goes by the name of dialectical materialism, or diamat for short. Now, this dialectical materialism was not a term that was used by Marx or Engels. It was developed by a socialist worker, Joseph Ditzen, in 1887. Now, this became very popular because Lenin, in Materialism and Overdetermination, talked about dialectical materialism. And Lenin thought that there are three defining characteristics of dialectical materialism. This, of course, I'm borrowing a bit from Baliber's philosophy of Marx. Now, the three defining characteristics of dialectical materialism, according to Lenin, were: one, inversion of Hegel; two, historicity of ethical principles in relation to class struggles, within quotes. Now, historicity of ethical, inversion of Hegel, this we will go into in detail, that what does Diamat mean by inversion of Hegel, and what does the overdetermination idea, concept mean by idea of inversion of Hegel. Now, historicity of ethical principles in relation to class struggle, this is in opposition to the idealist concept of ethical principles as stable and autonomous. Now, Lenin, in his Materialism and Empirio-criticism, says that he criticizes the idea that ethics is something which is derived from outside the system. It is like a Kantian idea, he says. He criticizes this and says that it is historical. Depending on the stage of the class struggle, society will have its own ethical principles. And third characteristic which Lenin emphasizes is the convergence of the laws of evolution in physics, biology, and political economy. Now, of course, this we will disagree with this in through overdetermination. The theme of inversion of Hegel becomes central to the elaboration of Diamat and its critique. Hegel turns out to be an important figure in our narrative of Marx's method. Now, previously I was thinking that whether we could leave out Hegel, but actually to understand Marx, we have to go into a bit of Hegel, and we'll need to have to concentrate on that, though I'm trying to put it as simply as possible. The widely publicized idea that Marxism is dialectical materialism is based on the reading that inversion of Hegel involved retention of Hegel's method or dialectics, replacing idea with matter as the prime mover of history. That is, as we will see presently, that Hegel's theory, it claims that from the ideas emanate reality. Reality is determined by idea. That is why it is called idealistic essentialism. And by inversion of Hegel, it is claimed by Diamat that what is being done is that in place of idea determining matter, you just invert it. You put matter determining idea, but you maintain Hegel's methodology, which we will see, the triadic methodology, which we will see presently. The theme of inversion is stated in many places. The first reference is found perhaps in a contribution to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, and probably set out most elaborately in the 1873 afterwards to Capital first volume. Hegel's dialectics involves essentialism, that is the view that every system, be it natural, biological, or social, is moved by a single cause which is autonomous to the system. In other words, it is not influenced by the system. That is, if we are talking of the movement of history, real history, human history, it is influenced, it is actually determined by our thought, our will, pure thought. It is moving in dialectically upwards, which we will elaborate presently. And this is not influenced. Our thought is not influenced by what is happening in reality. So Hegel's dialectics involves essential, that is a view that every system is moved by a single cause which is outside the system. It is not influenced by the system. Hegel argued that thought was autonomous and was the motor of history. According to Diamat's interpretation of inversion, the body of Hegel's reasoning was flawless, only it was feet, that is thought, up, and head, that is matter, down. Marx put matter on top, and that is, he put Hegel's dialectics right side up. In other words, he retained the dialectical method of reasoning of Hegel and replaced thought as the motor of history with matter as the motor of history. We will briefly go into Hegel's system of thought. Now, this is a very brief and sketchy reading that I'm using Hegel's philosophy of right to go into this. We take Hegel's narrative of the journey of will and self-consciousness that leads to the emergence of state as our example. This is what is happening in the real world. We start from the individual, how we move to the state. This is something that is happening in reality. On the other hand, there is a journey in the mind. The journey in the mind, journey of self-consciousness. And Hegel claims that this journey of self-consciousness is what is determining this movement in the real world. This is narrated in Hegel's philosophy of right. Now, Hegel's dialectical method can be elaborated through various triads. That is a system of three terms: thesis, antithesis, synthesis. This could be one triad. Another triad could be proposition, negation, negation of negation. That could be another triad. Then we could have many, one, etc. But we are not going into that. We are deploying this thesis, antithesis, synthesis. There is no particular reason for this. They are all equivalent, these triads. So we are deploying this idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis to schematically indicate the Hegelian dialectics at work in what is called diamat or dialectical materialism. Now, his starting point, that is the initial starting point, is the thesis is free will. That is my free will. It is pure will, but it is not satisfied with its freedom. Why? Because it is purely subjective. I can appreciate that my will is free, but there is no objective manifestation of this freedom, one, and two, there is no recognition of my free will by others. So then we move further, we move upwards, as Hegel puts it. The antithesis to this, what negates this, is pure externality. When I think of freedom, I close my eyes and think that I am free. But when I open my eyes, I see there is pure externality. The entire objective world, the real world, is conspiring against my freedom. I cannot just stretch my hand, it will get stuck in the table. In fact, my own body, this is not, as I grow older, I find that I try to walk fast, my mind is walking, but my body is not working. So all this, everything else apart from my will, that is pure externality. So we have free will as thesis, pure externality is antithesis, and the synthesis is property. This is, he says in para 44 of Philosophy of Right, I put my will into an object and make it my property. I put my will into an object, even my hand, my foot, my body, I put my will into it and make it my property. So now consciousness has taken a leap. Consciousness of free will, self-consciousness that is no longer purely self-reflexive. I'm not looking inwards and saying, well, I'm free, without taking anything else into consideration. But it is manifest. Now it can be seen in how that I have made things and my body, all these my property, I make them, I bend them to my will. So it is manifest. It is no longer just self-reflexive, but it is still purely individual. It is still not recognized by others. This then becomes a thesis of the next stage of sublimation or synthesis. In the next stage, you have, see, I have my property, you have your property. My thesis is my property, the antithesis is your property. And what is the synthesis? Synthesis is value which equates property in contract, and so is its universal. What does that mean? I have put my will into my property. You have put your will into your property. But the next stage of synthesis, next stage of sublimation, going to a higher generality, will require the equation of the two. Like previously, my will was there, external world was there. The two were equated when I put my will and made it my property. So property was a synthesis of my will and external world. Now here it is your property, my property. When do they become equal? They become equal only in exchange. Now that is, first of all, my property, I'm contracting to exchange, and then something is emerging which denotes both my property and your property, the value of each, how I can exchange, how much of my property will exchange with 1 unit of your property, and vice versa. So that is value. So value is the universal which equates property in contract. Self-consciousness now is not only manifested externally, but is social. One's free will is recognized by another. So self-consciousness, first, it was purely self-reflexive. It had no external manifestation. Then it became manifest in property. Now it is recognized by the other. once free will is recognized by the other, when we are trading in there, another universal is created, which is value, and so the other is recognizing my property and I am recognizing the other's property. Then there are further steps to state as a manifestation of the idea of free will. So free will is now moving upwards. When I recognize contract and value, I recognize the right to property. Without the right to property, you cannot have contract, you cannot have exchange, you cannot have value. So I recognize the right to property. I recognize your right, you recognize my right. But someone does not recognize the right. He wrongs. So right, wrong, out of this synthesized in concept of morality. And then it moves on to ethics and state. I'm not going to the entire journey. So the journey to the state in the material world is determined by the journey of self-consciousness in the mind. So this is essentialism and this is idealist essentialism. In my mind, I am thinking, and that is creating the journey in the real world. Now, we have to mention here that this journey of self-consciousness is based on the manifestation of spirit through the mediation of the external world in the interaction of individual free will and individual free will. That is, I am free, you are free. My freedom is free will is manifest in my property, your freedom, free will is manifest in your property. Then we are interacting with each other through the mediation of this property. We are exchanging this property. Now, what would happen if there was this mediation was taken away? That is, I have my free will, you have your free will, and we are directly colliding with one another. I wish to establish my free will on you, and you are. So now it is not the inanimate world. Both are animate, and we are. One is trying to impose one's will on another who also has a will. So then this will take us. This is discussed in the phenomenology of spirit. This confrontation will lead to a life and death struggle. As freedom of will resists freedom of will, both are resisting one another, and then one concedes, and then we have the master-servant. One concedes, follow the will of the other. Now then it goes, then there's another stage that when the servant then has to produce for the master, instead of, in the previous case we're talking putting my will into my property, that is in a sense producing things and exchanging. Here, when my will collides with another's free will, I am made a slave, and the other I accept. Instead of dying, I do not wish to die, so I accept thraldom. I accept him as the master, I become the slave. And then as a slave, I am producing, the master is only consuming. So the master doesn't gain any knowledge. So this is the genesis of knowledge. The slave gains knowledge. But however, that was just a digression. Let us stick to what we are discussing in the philosophy of right. So we have a journey in the mind, journey of self-consciousness, and this is determining the journey in the real world to the state. So this is idealism, but a particular kind of, this is essentialism, but a particular kind of essentialism, that is idealist essentialism. Now, Diamat's interpretation of Marx's philosophy claims that Marx retained the triadic method of reasoning, but put matter in place of mind, that is, in place of self-consciousness. Now, what does putting matter in place of mind or self-consciousness mean? To understand that, we have to first elaborate two concepts which are central to dialectical materialism. One, the forces of production. Now, what are the forces of production? These are a large set of apparatus. There is technology, resources, the structure of production, that is meaning division, the kind of division of labor that there is. We talked about it in our previous lecture, increasing division of labor, which was a component of the industrial revolution. Then there's Taylorism, Fordism, etc. So all these are clubbed together under forces of production. Under relations, what are the relations of production? The relations of production are the relations that people enter into in the course of production. That is, we enter into relations with one another. People enter into relations between themselves in various ways. That could be familial relation. There could be a relation through a club. There could be a relation through a political party, members of a political party. But here we are talking of a particular kind of relation, a relation which is born in the course of production. That is between the worker and the capitalist, say, between the serf and the lord. The serf, that is the vassal, the one who is cultivating, one who is producing according to the dictates of the lord in the feudal period, the serf and the lord, and also the slave and the master in the slave mode. So a temporarily stable combination of the two is called a mode of production. That is, the forces and the relations of production, they are consistent with one another. And then we have what is called a mode of production. It's a temporarily stable, because it is not as if a mode of production continues forever. A mode of production breaks down. What is called a more progressive mode of production is born. According to dialectical materialism, there is a succession of modes in a predetermined sequence. That is, the primitive communism is the least progressive. From primitive communism, we move to slavery, to feudalism, to capitalism, and then to socialism or communism, whatever. Now, each of what is this called these modes of production, they are characterized by a particular set of relations of production. Now, primitive communism, of course, is not a class divided society. Within slavery, you have the master and the slave. Within feudalism, you have the lord and the serf. Within capitalism, you have the worker and the capitalist. Within socialism, you have associated producers. That is, everyone there is a joint ownership of the means of production, maybe through the state or whatever. We are not going to that. Now, so each of these modes of production is determined by the kind of relations of production, and these relations of production are then defining a limit to which the force of production can develop within that mode of production. Within a mode of production, the forces develop up to a limit specified by the relations. Further development of the forces causes the breakdown of the existing relations of production through a revolutionary class struggle that ushers in a more progressive set of relations of production that allow further development of the new forces within the new mode of production. For example, in the slave society, the force of production could develop only thus far and no further. Why? Because what was the major constraint, as Perry Anderson says? The major constraint was that the Roman word for slave was the vocal instrument. So human labor was not differentiated from the working of the tools. So there was no concept of increasing efficiency. So this was an impediment to development of technology, and once it had reached its limit, then further development required the change of the mode of production. And who would change the mode of production? Now, each time that the force of production develop and reach the limit, the ceiling set by the relations of production, there is a group of people who want to develop the relations of the force of production further, and who are finding that the existing relations are acting as fetters. So they want to overthrow this system, these relations of production. For example, within the feudal system, there were the developing capital. Combined, there are the forces of production are the relations of production act as fetters. The forces of production want to develop further, but the forces of production are inanimate. So there must be some bearers of this. There is a class which wants to develop this further, and it takes the help of other classes to overthrow the existing relations. Forces of production replace self-consciousness. So this is the meaning of inversion as interpreted by Dialectical. The forces of production replace self-consciousness. Here, the motor of history is not self-consciousness. It is the forces of production which are developing independently, autonomously. They are not within the system. They are developing outside the system, and that is why the system has to be broken down. The system is not allowing it to develop. And so this is the meaning of inversion as interpreted by Diamat. Forces of production are replacing the relations of production or the self-consciousness as the motor of history. Here, the relations of production is the thesis, the forces is the antithesis. The revolutionary supersession of the relations in a new set of relations encompassing a new mode of production is the synthesis. So here we have the triadic argument that Hegel uncovered. This is retained in dialectical materialism. Only in place of idealism we have materialism, relations of production and force of production. The force of production are the motor. So the thesis is the relations of production, forces is the antithesis, and revolutionary supersession of the relations in a new set of relations encompassing a new mode of production is the synthesis. For example, consider the feudal relations. As we had remarked, the system does not allow large-scale industrial production because of the necessary visible presence of the feudal lord. Now, we had talked about this in our previous lecture, that feudalism is based on privilege. The feudal lord is privileged, and in order for his privilege to be, the case of Modi, of course, the current prime minister, of course, he shows up to be superior in various ways, in the dresses he wears, his 56 inches chest, etc. But that is not necessary to be a prime minister. We had diminutive people like Manmohan Singh or Lal Bahadur Shastri, and it didn't matter because the position is not based on any privilege. No one, the capitalist, for example. Now, I don't know, I've never seen the Birlas. I've seen pictures of the Tatas, of course, but they need not be any different from us because they are not privileged, so they don't have to show up as someone who's different, someone who's superior to us. But the feudal lord had to show up, and in order to show up, he had to be visible. In order to be visible, he had to ensure that the system, the feudal system, was territorially bound, was localized, was insular. Now, in order to ensure this, one had to, trade was of course there, but trade was not something which was desired by the feudal lords to that extent. Now, so scale of production was meant within the bounds of the feudal territory. So the scale of production was small. Now, as we discussed in our previous lecture, for various reasons, the artisans were fleeing to the towns. Now, within the towns, of course, there was much greater freedom. It was ruled by the guilds through their corporations, now through which were elected in various ways. Now, as a result, there was no restriction, there was no need to restrict the scale of production within the towns. And as we discussed, there was this transition from independent petty production to dependent petty production to manufactory and then to factory, which becomes then large scale as technology also improves, and you have division of labor, industrial division of labor. So then this large scale of production cannot be accommodated within the feudal system, because the feudal system tries to hedge you in, tries to enclose you within the boundaries of the lordship. So the capitalist can no longer tolerate the restrictions of movements of goods placed by the feudal placed by the feudal lords. Now, so this results in conflicts. Now, there's some mistakes in this. So the capitalist can no longer tolerate the restrictions of movements of goods placed on it by the feudal lords. And so this results in conflict and replacement of feudal relations by capitalist relations. Now, this is taken from the Communist Manifesto. I quote, "The feudal relations of property became no longer compatible with the already developed productive forces. They became so many fetters," the feudal relations, that is. They had to be burst asunder. They were burst asunder. They had to be burst asunder. They were burst asunder. Now, this is from the Communist Manifesto of 1848. So here we have the basis of Diamat, the force of production developing, the relations acting as fetters, and then the forces bursting them asunder. So the motor of history is the force of production. This is from Marx himself. So as we had remarked in our introductory remark, there is no true Marxism. In fact, quotations can be used to support this reading or that. Now, just as I'm quoting here from Marx's Communist Manifesto to show that Diamat can well be supported by quotations from Marx. Now, we can also use quotations from Marx to show that Diamat or dialectical materialism is not consistent with this philosophy, as we will argue through our reading of the thesis on Feuerbach. Now, so as we were saying at the beginning of our first lecture, that just as Marxism itself is not scientific in the sense of being the only true analysis of society, so also there is no true answer to what is Marxism. So I am presenting a kind of answer to motivate further reading, and also to the reading of Marxism, Marxist philosophy, which I think is necessary for initiating any action, political action, which is stunted by faith in the kind of philosophy that Diamat preaches. Now, both mechanical materialism of Feuerbach and the idealism of Hegel share the essentialist mode of reasoning that was detailed by Hegel. Marx discarded this mode early in his career, as we shall elaborate through the discussion on the thesis on Feuerbach. Inversion has been variously interpreted, and Althusser's interpretation, that is complete, there was a complete shift of ground, that is what Althusser is saying, that inversion means a complete shift of ground, would be consistent with our interpretation of Marxist philosophy. Now, the second trait of Diamat that Lenin mentions, historicity of ethical principles in relation to class struggles. This is consistent with our interpretation of Marx's methodology of analysis derived from the reading of Feuerbach. We will elaborate more of this historicity of ethical principles when we discuss Gramsci at a later stage of the series of lectures. The third trait of Diamat that Lenin talks about, that is convergence of evolutionary laws of natural world and cultured world, makes the philosophy mechanical and fated. That is, if cultured world, that is the human, the social world, is to move in the same way as the natural world, according to the same kind of laws, then it would be an evolutionary journey. There will be no question of revolution. There would be no question of voluntary action. So this would be fated. Now, this is something which is probably an impediment, acted as an impediment to action by various communist parties. We will presently criticize this position implicitly. The laws of social cultural systems are constituted differently from the evolutionary laws of, say, the natural systems. Dialectical materialism was given an even more inflexible deterministic interpretation by Stalin in Dialectical and Historical Materialism. It should be noted that Marx referred to dialectical method and Engels to materialistic dialectic. This I am taking from Baliver, implying that both were more concerned with the method. One is talking of the dialectical method, the other of materialistic dialectic. Both are talking of method. So they are more concerned with the method, which is derived through critique of both idealism and mechanical materialism. That their dialectic is new, involving practice. This method changes the very notion of materialism. All these we will see through our reading of the thesis on Feuerbach. We start from this tract. As soon after writing this, Marx and Engels were to abandon all further discussion of philosophy, as explicitly mentioned in the German Ideology, published in the same year. So this was the last tract in which they explicitly discussed philosophy. Althusser interpreted the inversion metaphor to mean a total rearrangement of the body of reasoning, in the way in which you analyze, in the way in which you reason. This is the view that we hold and will elaborate through our understanding of the thesis of Feuerbach. Now, we will not be able to discuss all the theses, but I think we'll be able to take up two theses in this lecture. So, the first thesis of Feuerbach: the chief defect of all hitherto existing materialism, that of Feuerbach included, is that the thing, reality, sensuousness, all these are referring to the same thing, is conceived only in the form of the object or of contemplation, but not as sensuous human activity, practice, not subjectively. That is, reality is just an object of contemplation. It is not human, it is not amenable to human action. Hence, in contradistinction to materialism, the active side was developed abstractly by idealism, which, of course, does not know real sensuous activity as such. So this was, since human activity is left out, idealism took it up, and of course, idealism does not know the real world, as we discussed in the course of discussing Hegel, that it was all in the mind. The mind was generating the motor of history. Feuerbach wants sensuous objects really distinct from the thought object. This is true, as he says, but he does not conceive human activity itself as objective activity. Hence, in the essence of Christianity, he regards the theoretical attitude as the only genuinely human attitude, while practice is conceived and fixed only in his dirty Judaical manifestation. Hence, he does not grasp the significance of revolutionary, of practical critical activity. Now, hitherto materialism conceived the world outside of thought as given, to be thought of, to be contemplated. That is hitherto existing materialism. That is, for us, it is Feuerbach in, and he was basically, Marx was critiquing the essence of Christianity. Hitherto materialism conceived the world outside thought as given, to be thought of or contemplated. You only think about it, but not itself in any way affected by that thought. This is overdetermination. It is reality is there, you are thinking about it, but it is not affecting, the thought is not affecting reality by its active side, contemplated not by, but not itself in any way affected by thought, by its active side, that is practice. So Marx is talking of practice, that is my thought impacting on reality, on the real world. So that is the bridge. Practice is the bridge that Marx is talking about. Idealism, in contrast, conceived the world out there as a product of thought itself. Feuerbach differentiates between the world out there, the sensuous objects, and what we contemplate about them, the thought objects. So he differentiates between the two. But he does not think of thought as directed to producing the world out there. He does not think of objective activity of practice. Practice is the producing the world out there. By the theoretical attitude, Marx is referring to the contemplation of the given essence to arrive at the conclusion that it is the result of projection, alienation of the essence of man. Now, Feuerbach wants sensuous objects really distinct from thought object, but it does not conceive human activity itself as objective activity. Hence, in the essence of Christianity, he regards the theoretical attitude as the only genuinely human attitude. Now, by theoretical attitude, Marx is referring to the contemplation of the given essence. Given essence is the essence of human essence. Marx is referring to the contemplation of the given human essence to arrive at the conclusion that it is the result of projection, alienation of the essence of man. There is no dialectical relation or practical critical relation of mutual constitution. Marx is critiquing Feuerbach's idea of religion given in the essence of Christianity. Now, Feuerbach was arguing that there is an essence of man, and this essence, the human essence, is alienated And because this human essence is alienated from man, so man projects the human essence into the clouds and there conceives of religion as the manifestation of this human essence. Now, what Marx is saying, that this, he regards the theoretical attitude as the only genuinely human attitude. That is, this projection, he thinks that appreciating the fact that human essence is alienated and projected into religion, appreciation of this fact is the genuinely human attitude. And if we can understand this, then we can understand the mysticism of religion. The essence of Christianity regards the theoretical attitude as the only genuinely human attitude. Marx is referring, there is no dialectical relation or practical critical relation of mutual constitution between reality and this essence of man, which is projected to create religion. Realization of the essence of religion does not reflect back to analysis of contradiction in human society from which results this essence. Now, Marx was of the view that this alienation of the human essence, there was no human essence which is ahistorical. At every point, in every society, human beings feel alienated because of the existing relations of production, and this alienation is what creates their belief in the religion as a way out. So this human essence is nothing that is given, fixed in thought, but it is a part of the reality, and this is the reality of the social order. This is what is generating the alienation within the social order, is what is generating religion. And he talks of, hence, dirty. He regards theoretical, while practice is conceived and fixed only in its dirty Judaical manifestation. So he thinks that human beings think that, well, Christianity, the dirty Judaical, that is Jew, dirty, that is of the earth. So the Jews were thinking of money, they were thinking of loaning money, they were thinking of money lending, etc., etc. So this is the dirty Judaical world. So Christianity, the essence of Christianity is manifested, is the essence of human beings, is the essence of man. So this is divorced totally from the dirty Judaical manifestations. Hence, he does not grasp the significance of revolutionary, of practical critical activity. That is, he does not grasp the fact that it is practice which relates thought with matter, and it is this relation of thought with matter in this world in which the society, the relations of production are creating these frictions and alienations, which is causing the projection into religion. This is what he's saying. Now, the second thesis, the question whether objective truth can be attributed to human thinking is not a question of theory, but is a practical question. Man must prove the truth, that is the reality and power, the this-sidedness of his thinking in practice. The dispute over the reality or non-reality of thinking that is isolated from practice is purely scholastic question. Objective truth, the question whether objective truth can be attributed to human thinking. Now, objective truth, what is objective truth? What is happening out there in the world? This is the result of human thinking in the sense of practice, that is producing according to a plan. So the question whether objective truth can be attributed to human thinking is not a question of theory, but is a practical question. It is a question of practice. Objective truth, what's happening in the world out there, is the result of human thinking in the sense of practice, that is producing according to a plan. This is the proof of the effectiveness, the power of his thinking. The this-sidedness of his thinking means the effect of his thinking on the real world, the this-sidedness of his thinking. This constitutes the idea, thought, as well as matter. See, thinking as activity is itself a part of reality. Hence, to divorce thinking from its active part and then to contemplate whether it is real is an empty academic exercise. So man must prove the truth, that is the reality and power, the decidedness of his thinking, his in practice. That is, he must put his thought into practice in the real world. The dispute over reality or non-reality of thinking, which is isolated from practice, unless you put your thoughts into practice. If you just think whether this thinking is right, whether this thinking is wrong, the dispute over reality or non-reality of thinking that is isolated from practice is a purely scholastic question. Among other things, this theory of knowledge implies that objectivity of truth is ever changing. Hence, there is no absolute truth. So you put your plan into execution. You are not able to execute your entire plan because the objective world, what is there out there, this is contradicting your plans. This is refuting some of the things that you had planned, and therefore you have to go back to the drawing board. So there is constant. So your thought is a part of this real world, and the connection between the inanimate world and your thinking, this is through practice, which relates the truth. So it is not, you cannot have you cannot isolate thinking from practice, from reality. Now the third thesis, I think we will end with the discussion of this thesis. Says the materialist doctrine concerning the changing of circumstances and upbringing forgets that circumstances are changed by men, and that it is essential to educate the educator himself. This doctrine must therefore divide society into two parts: one which is superior to society, the coincidence of the changing of circumstances and of human activity or self-changing can be conceived and rationally understood only as revolutionary practice. So he's saying the previous, that is the mechanical materialism, did not accept that material circumstances are changed by man. The thought of material society as being governed by natural laws, they thought of material society as being governed by natural laws that are known to the educator. Now this is very important. He says that the materialist doctrine concerning the changing of circumstances and upbringing forgets that circumstances are changed by men, and that is it is essential to educate the educator himself. What does he mean by saying it is essential to educate the educator himself? Now this is, I think, a very significant passage. That is, they thought of material society as being governed by natural laws, and that is the mechanical materialists, including Feuerbach. These laws are known to the educator, the organic leader, or the political leaders, as they were later called, through contemplation. See, there is the real world is out there, and all you can do is contemplate it. That is what the mechanical materialism of Feuerbach said. So they thought of material society as being governed by natural laws that are known to the educator through contemplation. Hence, they become superior to the rest of society. This doctrine must therefore divide society into two parts, one of which is superior to society. So, so there is in the process, but knowledge can only be based on practice. So what the mechanical materialism was saying is that through contemplation, the educator knows and becomes superior to the rest of society. But what Marx is saying is that knowledge can only be based on practice. The attempt to put your plans to work in the process, as you come up against material constraints that force you to modify your plans, you also learn and so change yourself. So there is no division between those who know and those who must be educated. All must learn through revolutionary practice. This is a fundamental idea of dialectical materialism that is ignored by most communist movements because of the uncritical acceptance of the idea of the vanguard party. You see, so what Marx is, this thesis 3 is very important, that the materialist doctrine concerning the changing of circumstances and upbringing, he's talking of the previous materialist doctrine, forgets that circumstances are changed by men, and that is essential. It is essential to educate the educator himself. Why? The educator was thinking that he needs no education, he doesn't have to learn, there is no practice. The education knows the natural laws, and so he is superior. This doctrine must therefore divide society into two parts, one of which is superior to society. The coincidence of the changing of circumstances and of human activity, that is, human activity is changing the circumstances or self-changing, can be conceived and rationally understood only as revolutionary practice. So it is only through revolutionary practice that we know that the educator educates himself, and therefore no one is superior. There is no concept of the knowing leaders who can then guide the cadre. So this is a very important thesis, I think. I think I will end here because this is the rest we'll take up in the next series, because I think that there should be a lot of questions. We have discussed some things which are, or should I continue? Are there questions?
No, there is only one question in the chat box, and that is from Srimanjari Guru.
Can you please explain why in the first stage the synthesis is individual and not social, since the first stage will happen simultaneously for all individuals? When somebody manifests in the first stage, it won't depend on others. The first stage, I suppose you're talking of the Hegelian synthesis.
Yes,
is it?
yes.
Now, in the first stage, that is starting from free will, we move on to property, the synthesis in property. Pure thesis is free will, antithesis is pure externality, and synthesis is property. I put my will into external world and make it my property. Now, this is an individual's self-consciousness, which is being manifested. One individual, another individual, there are many individuals are doing this, but this is not social. You see, isolated individuals, that is not what we call social. There must be a relation between the individuals in order for any activity to be social. You are quite right in saying that why in the first stage is individual and not social. In the first stage will happen simultaneously for all individuals. Yes, it will happen simultaneously for all individuals, but still it is individual because they're not interacting with one another. All right. So,
Thank you.
are there any questions?
No, there are no other questions in the chat box.
No. Can you throw it?
Yes, there is a question from Pranab Basu. Why did primitive communism turn to slavery?
Why did primitive communism turn to slavery?
Why you call productive relationships?
Why did primitive communism turn to slavery? Now, there are various answers to this. I'm not very good at history, but you see, basically it is a question of primitive communism turning into slavery. That probably is something which cannot be well explained by Diamat. There is a question of conquest, of external force, of one tribe enslaving another, which becomes very important. So I think that we can have other stories of magic. We have other narratives of magic, the intervention of magic in the form of religion, developing into religion, enslavement within the community. But I think it was mainly an external phenomenon. So in that sense, it is not, doesn't fit into the scheme of the Diamat, really. Yes. Pradip, is he there? I don't know. Anyway, are there any other questions?
Can I ask one question?
Sure, why not? I think
Pranab, you have written that productive forces, production relations are the thesis and productive forces are the antithesis. But don't you think productive forces comes first, so it is the thesis, and then production relations are the antithesis? Because productive forces are the autonomous, independent agency of social change. So productive forces comes first. Productive forces is the essence. If there is any essentialism in Diamat, then it is centered around
productive
productive
forces are
forces.
the essence. Productive forces, yes, productive forces are the essence of Diamat. Yes, that is true. So
So
you're saying
productive
that
forces are the thesis and production relations are the antithesis. Not, but you have written that production relations are the
actually
antithesis.
uh, you can conceive it in either way. You see, once the relations are changed, your birth of a new mode of production. Now, within this new mode of it is the relations which is allowing the forces to develop this far and no further. So, in that sense, the relations are there, the forces are developing, they're coming into conflict with the existing relations, and then there is a synthesis and a new relation. Now, maybe yes, maybe
But
yeah. I
how
get,
do we
I
how do we
get,
decide? How do we decide which one is thesis and which one is antithesis?
I get your point. I get your point.
But
I will,
thesis comes prior to antithesis. So how do we judge? How do we
this
decide
is
this?
relations are prior in the sense that you see, unless you have a new relations of production, the forces of production cannot develop. So once you have a relation of production, the forces of production develop within it. So in that sense, they are prior. Now, if the forces of production are prior, in a revolutionary situation, you are saying that the force of production will be prior. You're right. In the revolutionary situation, of course, they will be prior. I'll have to think about this. I'll have to think about
Okay,
this.
thank you, thank you.
It does not seem that anyone has a question
So,
at this
shall we
stage.
move on to the next thesis? Okay. So, we are moving on to the fourth thesis since we don't have too many questions on the previous three theses. Feuerbach starts out from the fact of religious self-alienation, of the duplication of the world into a religious world and a secular one. His work consists in resolving the religious one into its secular basis, but that the secular basis detaches itself from itself and establishes itself establishes itself as an independent realm in the clouds can only be explained by the cleavages and self-contradictions within this secular basis. The latter must therefore in itself be both understood in its contradiction and revolutionized in practice. Thus, for instance, after the after the earthly family is discovered to be the secret of the holy family, the former must then itself be destroyed in theory and practice. Now, what Marx is interpreting Feuerbach as saying is that there is this secular world in which you have the earthly family, and there is the human essence. Feuerbach starts on the fact of religious self-alienation. So you are alienated, the human essence is alienated and it is projected into the world out there, into the clouds, and religion is made. So if one understands that it is the alienation of man from his essence which is giving birth to religion, if one can, if man can be made to understand this, human beings can be made to understand this, if society can be made to understand this, then the basis of religion will be demolished. So Feuerbach is claiming. Now, what Marx is saying is that you have to understand that this alienation of the essence of man, the human essence, is not something which is asocial. It is the product of society itself. It is the product of the cleavages in society. Thus, for instance, after the earthly family is discovered to be the secret of the holy family, the earthly family is discovered to be the secret of the holy family. The holy family is, of course, the family of God the Father, God the Son, Holy Ghost, the Trinity of Christianity. This is discovered to be, the earthly family is discovered with the secret. That is, the earthly family, they are alienated from their essence, and this essence is then attributed to God, and then God determines our destiny. So that is the earthly family is discovered to be the secret of the Holy Family, in the sense that human beings on earth, their alienation from their own essence, this is what is causing the birth of religion. And once this is understood, the fantasy about religion will disappear. But Marx is saying that after the earthly family is discovered to be the secret of the Holy Family, the former must then itself be destroyed in theory and in practice. In theory and in practice, the former, that is the earthly family. That why? Because we are alienated, the feeling of alienation from our essence, that we lack, that we are not whole. This feeling is born from the fact of the relations of production, that is, relations of domination, relations of power, which is disempowering us, which is causing us to think that we are not whole. We are cleft. That is, we have the master who is determining our fate, and so we are not really human beings. So this is the relations of production themselves are the cause of alienation, and this alienation is what is causing the birth of religion. That is what Marx is saying, that it is not human essence as such which is always there as such, and human beings are alienated from their essence, and this is leading to the birth of religion. Saying that even if this is understood, the basis of religion will not be abolished until the inequality, the disempowerment within the existing social structure, that is ended, because that is causing alienation, leading to the birth of religion. Feuerbach, not satisfied with abstract thinking, wants contemplation, but he does not conceive sensuousness as practical human sensuous activity. Feuerbach, not satisfied with abstract thinking. Not satisfied with abstract thinking. Why is he saying this? This is, abstract thinking is idealism, idealist essentialism. So Feuerbach was criticizing that. So Feuerbach is not satisfied with abstract thinking. Not satisfied with abstract thinking, wants contemplation. But what is the other side of this abstract thinking which Feuerbach is proposing? He wants contemplation. That is, there is reality and we should contemplate reality. The reality is a force by itself. It is not the product of our thought. He is not satisfied with abstract thinking. So reality is there. It has its own laws of motions and we should contemplate it. Mind comes after matter and we should contemplate. This is what Feuerbach is saying. But he does not conceive sensuousness as practical human sensuous activity. Sensuousness is not just the world out there. It is practical human sensuous activity. So it is again the question of practice. That is, we are thinking, putting our thoughts into practice. Again and again, Marx is coming back to this concept of practice, which is linking activity, which is linking the real world, the objective world, and the mental world, and the two together are over-determining one another. This is the Marxist criticism of mechanical materialism of Feuerbach. I think I will end here because this will this will require a rather long elaboration, and I think that we have covered a long distance through this. So, are there no questions on the thesis on Feuerbach? Yes, so I will take it that there are no further questions No, there is one question. After the earthly family is discovered to be the secret of the holy family, you please explain this once more. After the, so yeah, let me come back to the slide. After the earthly, this is thesis 4 you're asking about. Thus, for instance, after the earthly family uh, is discovered to be the secret of the holy family, the former must then itself be destroyed in theory and in practice. So Feuerbach was saying that religious mysticism, religious myths, all these are these are fetters. These constrain our thought, and so this must be done away with. Now, how should this be done away with? Feuerbach's prescription, so to say, is that if you can explain properly that religion is born out of the alienation of man from his essence, then we will understand that is, I'm not whole. You see, I think I lack this. I'm not sympathetic to people. I am not caregiving. Say things like this. I am suppose I backchat, all these things. So I realize these are my defects. So I cannot overcome my defects. So then, but I have a conception of the human essence, the best of humanity, and this human essence then I project into the clouds and construct a god, and then I pay my obeisance to God. I steal, I rob, I do all this, but then the essence of man I project into the clouds, and I pay my respects to that essence, and this washes the sins away from me. So if it can be made, people can be made to understand that it is really your own essence, your own goodness, which you are praying to. There is nothing called a religious. There's nothing called a Christ, the Son, and the Father, and the Holy Ghost, etc. In that case, religion would be abolished, and this would then not act as a constraint on our free thinking. This was what Feuerbach was saying. So what Marx is saying, that once this earthly family, it is discovered that, well, religion emanates from this earthly family, from my essence. Once it is discovered, so this does not end religion. Why? Because there is no given essence. The alienation is not from any given essence which is there in all societies. Alienation is born out of this society, out of these relations of productions, out of these power relations, out of the exploitative relations. People are feeling alienated. Like, for example, the laborer feels alienated from his work. We'll discuss this in detail later. That once the laborer cannot plan the work, laborer executes the other's plan, so one is feeling alienated from labor. So there are various kinds of alienations which human beings feel within the given society, which is a product of the social order. So it is not simply sufficient to say that God is a projection of human essence. There is nothing called a human essence. God, you are projecting, you are creating God to overcome your alienation. The alienation is a product of the earthly family. So the former must then itself be destroyed in theory and in practice. The earthly family meaning the relations of production, the relations of power, the relations of domination. All these must be destroyed in theory and in practice. That is, in theory, one must understand that it is this earthly family, these relations on the earth, social relations, which are creating the alienation. So it must be destroyed. This understanding itself is destroying the theory about the earthly family, and in practice it must be shattered. That is, one is talking of revolutionary practice. Yes.
Thank you, sir. So, in the I had one last question, sir. In the first thesis, there was some mention about only the practical. I forgot. One second. So, he
Are you
regards.
seeing the?
Uh,
Is it shown on the screen? But this is no. Is
yes,
it
sir.
shown?
Sir, yes. So, sir, this line that only the theoretical. He regards the theoretical attitude as the only genuine human attitude. This portion, sir, can you please explain once more?
Feuerbach wants sensuous, sensuous objects really distinct from thought
Uh-huh.
objects, but does not conceive human activity itself. And so the essence of Christianity regards
Yes,
the
sir.
theoretical attitude as the only genuinely human attitude. Now, what he's saying here, essence of Christianity, is counterposing Christianity with Judaism. Now, according to the Feuerbach in the essence of Christianity, Christianity is the most developed form of religion in the sense that it represents, it is the product of the alienated essence of human essence. Man's human essence is alienated and projected into the clouds, and there is born Christianity, the distilled human essence. He regards the essence of Christianity, regards hence in the essence of Christianity regards the theoretical attitude as the only genuinely human attitude. That is the theoretical attitude which is generating Christianity. This is a theoretical attitude which is not concerned with the real world. By theoretical attitude is as the only genuinely human attitude, not concerned with the real world, while practice is conceived and fixed only, that is, Christianity is the theoretical attitude, the human essence, projection of the human essence is generating Christianity, while practice is conceived and fixed only in its dirty Judaical manifestation. On the other hand, that is left. The real world working dirt of the earth, the earthly practice, that is what is creating Judaism. So he's saying that Christianity is the most developed form of religion because it is divorced from all these, from all the real world trials and tribulations. It is only concerned with the human essence. So he regards this theoretical attitude as the only genuinely human attitude, that is, which is generating Christianity, whereas practice is conceived and fixed only in its dirty Judaical manifestation. So the rest, the other religions, particularly Judaism, that is born of something which is not distilled into the human essence. It is not born of the projection of the human essence. Have I answered you?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So, if there are no other questions, shall we end here? So, thank you, everybody.
And thank you, and good night.
Good night, everybody.